On November 9, 2025, global trade was shaken, not by Washington or Beijing, but by Ottawa. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney stunned the world by ending Canada's retaliatory tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. This move sent shockwaves through international markets and left U.S. leaders scrambling. For months, Canada's tariffs had shielded its auto industry from a flood of cheap Chinese EVs. Now that wall is gone. Why did Carney do this? The answer lies in a bitter trade war with the United States. President Trump's administration had imposed punishing tariffs on Canada, and negotiations had collapsed. The relationship between the two leaders had grown icy. Carney's decision signals that Canada is done waiting for a deal with America. Instead, it's charting a new course, one that could bring Chinese EVs into North America through Canada. This threatens American jobs in the U.S. auto sector, while offering Canadian consumers cheaper cars and potential Chinese investment. But it also risks angering the U.S. and deepening ties with China, America's main rival. The world is watching as this high-stakes chess game unfolds. The timing is dramatic. Tensions between the U.S. and Canada are at a peak, and both Carney and Trump are preparing for meetings with China's Xi Jinping. Carney's move is a calculated play, using trade policy as a tool of diplomacy. He's telling Trump and the world that Canada won't be sidelined. Canada will forge new alliances to protect its interests. The question now, what happens next? This single act has redrawn the lines of global trade. The consequences are just beginning to be felt. The world's eyes are on Ottawa, Washington, and Beijing. The stakes for North America and the world have never been higher. The next moves will define the future of trade. For decades, the US and Canada were close partners, bound by trade and shared values, but that partnership shattered in a brutal trade war. President Trump's America First agenda hit Canada with heavy tariffs, devastating Ontario's industries. Factories closed, layoffs mounted, and talks stalled. Trust evaporated. The era of automatic cooperation was over. Canada struck back, dropping tariffs on Chinese EVs, signaling it wouldn't be sidelined. The fallout is only beginning. The world is watching what comes next. What derailed US-Canada trade talks? A Canadian TV ad featuring Ronald Reagan. The Ontario government, hit hard by US tariffs, aired an ad using Reagan's voice warning against protectionism. The message: even a revered American president would oppose Trump's tariffs. Trump's reaction was swift and furious, calling the ad fake and accusing Canada of meddling in US affairs. The Trump administration saw it as a personal attack, an attempt to sway American opinion and influence a Supreme Court case on tariffs. The Reagan Foundation objected, but Ontario Premier Doug Ford defended the ad as authentic and historical. In the heated atmosphere, the distinction was lost. The ad became a symbol of disrespect, the final nail in the coffin for trade talks. For Trump, it proved Canada wasn't a good faith partner. For Canada, it showed the US was impossible to negotiate with. Communication broke down completely. The incident pushed Carney to a critical decision. If diplomacy with the US was dead, Canada needed new partners. The path to Asia and China became a necessity, not just an option. The trade war had become personal and political. Canada's pivot east was now inevitable. The Reagan ad was more than a commercial. It was a spark in a tinderbox. The fallout would reshape North American trade. The world took notice. The stakes had never been higher. With Washington's door closed, Carney looked east. He announced a bold strategy: double Canadian exports to non-US countries within a decade. This pivot to Asia marked a fundamental shift in Canadian policy. For generations, Canada's prosperity depended on the US. 3/4 of exports went south. Now, Carney aimed to break that dependency. The centerpiece, a high-profile trip to Asia, including a crucial meeting with China's Xi Jinping. At a time of US-China rivalry, Canada was seeking closer ties with Beijing. The logic was clear. Canada's resources and technology could find huge new markets in Asia's growing middle class. Diversifying trade would make Canada less vulnerable to US pressure. Dropping tariffs on Chinese EVs fit this strategy, a gesture of goodwill to Beijing and a signal that Canada was open for business. But the risks were real. Closer ties with China could further alienate the US and draw Canada into a global power struggle. Critics warned of trading one dependency for another, citing China's human rights and trade practices, but Carney saw inaction as a greater risk. The US trade war threatened Canada's economy. The pivot to Asia was his bold answer. Canada was betting on a new future. The world was watching. The stakes were enormous. Ottawa's announcement hit Washington like a bombshell. President Trump was furious, seeing Carney's move as a betrayal. The US had spent years trying to contain China's economic influence. Now its closest ally was opening a backdoor for Chinese goods. The personal animosity between Trump and Carney threatened to boil over. American workers, especially in the auto industry, were anxious. They feared a flood of cheap Chinese EVs through Canada, threatening jobs and factories. US automakers faced a new, formidable competitor. The United Auto Workers Union called Canada's move a grave threat and urged Trump to respond forcefully. Trump, who built his presidency on protecting American workers, now faced a scenario where his own tariffs could be bypassed. He was under pressure to act. Options ranged from stricter border controls to new tariffs on Canadian goods. But any response risked escalating the trade war and destabilizing the North American economy. The anxiety was about more than economics. It was about national identity and America's place in the world. For many, Canada's pivot felt like a rejection of shared history. It raised questions about America's influence, even with its closest friends. As the US entered a critical election cycle, these questions became central. The future of North American trade and America's global standing was at stake. The world was watching. The next moves would be decisive. Amid the trade drama, a crucial legal battle was brewing in Washington. The U.S. Supreme Court was set to hear a case challenging Trump's authority to impose sweeping tariffs without Congress. Businesses argued the Constitution gives Congress, not the president, control over foreign commerce. A ruling against Trump could force the U.S. to refund billions in tariffs and strip the president of his key economic weapon. It would shift trade power back to Congress and fundamentally alter U.S. trade policy. The timing added intrigue to the US-Canada dispute. Trump accused Canada of trying to influence the court with the Reagan ad. The administration knew its tariff power was on shaky ground. A loss in court would be a major defeat for America first, and validate critics at home and abroad. For Canada, a ruling against Trump would be a massive victory, potentially ending the trade war and forcing new negotiations. If the court upheld Trump's authority, he could escalate the conflict. This legal uncertainty factored into Carney's calculations. He may have bet that Trump's tariff power wouldn't last. By acting now, Canada positioned itself for a post-tariff future. The outcome would shape the next chapter of North American trade. The stakes were enormous. The world was watching. The dust hasn't settled, but North American trade has been permanently altered. Canada's move is more than a dispute over cars. It's a fundamental realignment. Canada is reducing its economic dependence on the US, opening new opportunities but also new risks. Cheaper Chinese EVs could speed Canada's green transition and attract investment, but threaten the auto parts industry tied to US supply chains. If the US retaliates, thousands of Canadian jobs could be lost. Ontario Premier Doug Ford now faces a harsh reality. His province could be the biggest loser in a trade war. New Asian partnerships may eventually replace lost US business, but the transition will be painful. Canadian workers are caught in the middle of a high-stakes gamble. Experts are divided. Trump may retaliate forcefully, or the US might seek a new deal to lure Canada back. The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs will be pivotal. A decision against Trump could reset relations. Otherwise, the conflict may escalate. Carney's decision has forced a reckoning for North America. Can the US-Canada partnership be repaired, or is the era of America first here to stay? Will Canada succeed in its pivot to Asia, or be caught between superpowers? The world is watching as the next moves are made. The future of global trade hangs in the balance.